This week we're going to look at the process of displaying and rendering and animating a hierarchical model that you created in Lightwave from last week. So again, I have the tank model, and it has 3 separate Lightwave layers organized in a hierarchy. The root layer is called base, and then a child of base is the turret, and the child of the turret is the gun. Okay, so I have demo 8 up, and as you can see, we're loading in 2 models. A tree model is being loaded in just so we have something else for comparison. Next, we're loading in this tank model, and so notice how we're loading it. Also, we've got 2 different textures because this model, one of the layers, the base layer, uses this texture that you see here, and the other 2 layers, the turret and the gun, use this camouflage texture here. Okay, so we're loading in a texture called tank camo and another one called tank metal. Okay, now when it comes to drawing this and animating it, it's a little complicated, but let's walk through it. First of all, we're drawing a tree here. Actually, we got 2 trees that are being drawn. Next, we're going to draw the tank. Alright, so first of all, we're going to perform an animation on the turret. So what we're going to do is have the turret move around. So I have a variable here called ROT turret, and that's just going to go from 0 to 360, and so it allows to see this turret moving around. So in your program, when you create variables for your different layers, go ahead and create something that's appropriate. Typically, you don't want to take a layer and move it. So, for example, I probably wouldn't want to take this turret with the attached gun, of course, and then just move it around, because if I did that, it would become detached from the parent, and that's probably not what I want to happen. So you need to think about the kind of transformations that you want to perform. In this case, I want to do a rotation about the y-axis, because that's going to allow me to move the turret around, but as you can see, it's still going to maintain its relationship to the base. Okay, so we're going to generate a rotation matrix about the y-axis, and we're going to put that in M. And next, in order to apply this rotation, we have to apply it to the layer. So we're going to call a function called gx3d get object layer. We're going to plug in the object, which is the tank, and then the name of the layer. So this layer name needs to match up with the layer name in Lightwave. And upper and lowercase makes a difference, so be aware of that. So then this function will search through this Lightwave object, and it'll try to find that particular layer by name, and you'll get back a handle to it, which is this gx3 object layer, this pointer. And using that, I can call set object layer matrix, plug in the name of the object and that particular layer, and then plug in the transformation matrix. Next, we're going to rotate the gun, and the gun is going to rotate about the x-axis, because if you look back on at the model here, we see the x-axis in this direction here. So we want to perform a rotation on the gun about the x-axis, which will have the effect of doing this here. So we can raise the gun and lower the gun. Okay, so in Lightwave here, I'm in the right view, so you can see the Z axis here and the X axis here. Therefore, the rotation that I perform in this view is going to be about the X axis. Okay, so we're creating a X-axis rotation matrix. Again, we've got a variable here that's just going to go from 0 to 40. It's just going to go back and forth from 0 to 40, just so we see this thing moving. Now, I should note that whenever the turret moves, since the gun is a child of the turret, moving the turret should also move the gun. However, when we move the gun, that should not affect the turret. There again, we're going to get the object layer for the gun. Again, using the same name, the layer name in Lightwave. And we're going to set the object layer matrix to that matrix, that rotation matrix. I could have also performed a transformation on the base layer, which is the bottom layer here. I didn't do that. In the program that you're going to work on this week, I'm going to want you to animate all the different parts. So I want you to do something. If you had a model similar to this with 3 different layers and a hierarchy, I'd want you to animate all 3 of them. Okay. Now, another way to animate the base layer, besides using this technique here where we get the object layer based on its name and then plug in a matrix, another way to animate the entire object, which is to say to animate the base layer or the root layer of the object, is simply to plug in a transformation matrix to the object itself. So that would affect the root layer. Okay, and in this case I'm not animating it, I'm simply translating the object into the world. Okay, now when we call draw object, which I have commented out here and I'll explain why, what that will do is in addition to drawing the object on the screen, before it draws the object, it'll go through any layers. So if you have a Lightwave object that has multiple layers, and it will multiply together the various transformation matrices from the different layers in the order of the hierarchy so that the transformations appear correct. Now, since I have draw object commented out, I'm not going to get that multiplication of the matrices, which is important. So there's a way to manually do that, and it's called GX3D Object Update Transforms. And basically what it'll do is it'll go and take the transformation matrix for the base and multiply it by the turret, and then the turret times the gun, and so forth. And so that way we get this effect where moving the turret, animating the turret animates not only the turret but the gun, and so we have to multiply those matrices together. You can look at the source code for this function if you want to learn more about how that works. But essentially, if you don't call this function, if you haven't commented out, then you won't see the animation on the different layers. Okay. Also, be sure when you call it, you've already performed the animation on the layers. In other words, you've set the object layer matrix for each layer that you want to transform independently. And then you go ahead and call update transforms. Also, make sure that you've plugged in the transformation matrix for the entire object. Okay, so we'll call update transforms basically right before we draw the object. Now, I have here some code that's going to draw each of the 3 layers separately. Now, that's not always required. It would not be required if the entire object used one single texture. Okay, so if the whole object used the same texture, then it wouldn't be necessary to draw it like this. And I could have done it the way I have here, the way that's commented out. So we'd simply set the texture that we want to use, and then we call GX3D draw object, and it would draw all the different layers using that texture. However, since a couple of these layers use a different texture, then the way to render this object is not by calling draw object, but by calling draw object layer for each layer. Okay, so the way to handle it is, first of all, I need to get that layer. So again, we'll call get object layer, plugging in the name of the object and the name of the layer, and that'll give us the pointer back to that particular layer. Then we can set the texture you want to use. So in the case of the base layer, I want to use this metal texture. And then we'll call draw object layer with that layer name. There again, we do the same thing for the gun layer. But in this case, this one uses a different texture, so it's the camo texture, and then so on. Okay, so if you have a model that uses multiple layers and the layers use different textures, then you'll have to draw the layers separately like this.